still working from home." That was the first thing my father said to me that night, as if the patio wasn't packed with whispering relatives, champagne flutes and string lights that made everything look prettier than it felt. He was holding a whiskey glass like a weapon, smirking across the yard like he owned the oxygen. In his mind, he still did. I smiled small and sharp just as my phone buzzed quietly in my coat pocket. I slid it out and glanced down. Acquisition of Kingswell Industries complete. You now own 100%. My pulse didn't jump. I didn't flinch. I just looked up, locked eyes with the man who'd spent my entire life doubting me, and realized he had no idea what had just happened. The empire he worshipped, the one he built with contempt for everything I stood for, I owned it now. And this was the moment they had all been waiting for, one more chance to smirk, to chuckle, to dismiss the daughter with her little green ideas. But they didn't know. They didn't know that while they were busy ridiculing me, I had just rewritten the story of our family. Narration her world. Growing up as a Blake meant learning early that love came with conditions, that success had a dress code, a pedigree, and a business degree. Our family name wasn't just printed on the bronze plaque outside Kingswell Industries HQ. It was carved into the walls, etched into company stationery, and whispered like gospel in every business school from Stanford to Yale. My grandfather started Kingswell in 1952, a tool company turned industrial empire. By the time I was born, it wasn't just a company, it was a religion. And Charles Blake, my father, was its high priest, CEO, legacy protector, iron-fisted visionary, the kind of man who treated family dinners like board meetings. He never yelled, he didn't need to, he just looked at you in that way like you'd failed before you even tried. The golden child. And then there was Trevor, my older brother, my father's mirror, captain of the debate team, graduated Wharton, took over Kingswell's West Coast operations by 27. He spoke in spreadsheets. He negotiated deals over brandy. He was everything I wasn't, and everything my father wanted. The black sheep. And then there was me, Madison Blake, the artist, the idealist, the she'll grow out of it phase. While Trevor was learning capital investment, I was sketching solar-powered microgrid systems on napkins. I brought ideas to the dinner table like, what if Kingswell cut emissions 40% using circular systems? And my father would just sip his wine and say, sustainability might look cute on a college brochure, Madison, but in the real world, margins matter. Trevor would smirk. Mom would shoot me that soft warning smile, the one that said, don't push, just get through dessert without starting a war. And I would swallow it all down. The frustration, the fury, the ache, not because I was weak, but because I was watching, learning, and planning. They used to say I was creative, as if that were a flaw that might fade with time. I wasn't failing. I was different. But in the Blake household, different was dangerous. Charles Blake believed in legacy, not innovation, not curiosity, legacy. To him, I wasn't his daughter. I was a potential PR liability. He raised Trevor like a CEO in training and treated me like I was embarrassing the brand. Trevor once told me during a family barbecue, Dad says idealism is a luxury. You should try focusing on the real world sometime. I didn't even look up. I just stared at the grill flames and whispered in my head, no, I'm focusing on the future. You're stuck in the past. And then there was my mother, Veronica Blake, elegant, poised, practically silent. She spent decades one step behind my father, nodding at every boardroom victory and diffusing every emotional grenade at dinner with a tight smile. She never told me I was wrong, but she never told me I was right either. That silence. It was the loudest message of all, a moment of defiance. I remember the night I told them I got into Stanford, environmental engineering, full ride, research track. Dad paused with his fork mid-air. Stanford, he repeated like I'd said Mars. You've always been so good with people. Why not business or law or Wharton like Trevor? Because I want to build things, I said. Sustainable systems, real infrastructure, solutions. He set down his fork, looked me in the eye. "You think you're smarter than the generations that built Kingswell." I didn't answer. What was the point? That night, I zipped up my duffel bag and packed my dreams, not because I was running away, but because I was finally running toward something. Stanford, where she could breathe. At Stanford, I could breathe. My questions weren't annoyances, they were the assignments. My professors didn't roll their eyes, they took notes. I remember one day in Dr. Elise Grant's office, sunlight hitting her whiteboard sketches as I ranted about Kingswell's carbon practices and how no one at home listened. She smiled gently and said, "You're not trying to burn the system, Madison. You're trying to redesign it. That always makes the old guard uncomfortable." That was the day I realized I wasn't broken. I just didn't belong in their version of success. But maybe, just maybe, I could build my own. It started in a tiny co-working space in Oakland. Concrete floors, flickering overhead lights, and a weird smell of printer ink and someone's kombucha obsession. We shared the space with a dog-walking startup and a barefoot VR company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I didn't want to start a company. I wanted to start a movement. Verdant Cores was built out of frustration, purpose, and stubborn hope. I wanted to prove that sustainable infrastructure wasn't a dream, it was a strategy. My co-founder Tasha joined me first, sharp, relentless, and willing to work for equity and takeout tacos. Then came Jasper, a systems engineer who saw math the way artists see brushstrokes, and Noah, a quiet supply chain analyst who'd once exposed greenwashing at a major firm. We weren't wealthy, we weren't powerful, but we were obsessed. Some nights I slept on the office couch, other nights I didn't sleep at all. I poured every dime into payroll. I thrifted my blazers. I learned to live on ramen and sheer determination. And back home, they didn't know a thing. Every holiday dinner was a performance. Dad would nod politely like I was some kid selling succulents at a farmer's market. Trevor would brag about Kingswell's latest contract like it was a mic drop. "You still playing with climate calculators, Mads?" He smirked one night over duck confit. "We just helped a textile plant cut emissions by 45% while increasing output by 18%. I said. Silence. Dad coughed into his napkin. Mom changed the subject. They still didn't get it. To them, if it wasn't Kingswell, it wasn't real. But while they were clinging to buzzwords, we were building systems. Verdant's tech was lean, smart, and adaptable. Our predictive maintenance and adaptive scheduling slashed energy costs for 5 factories in under a year. Clients called it magic. We called it math and mission. By year 2, ESG investors started noticing. We raised a seed round. We built proprietary analytics. We doubled our client base. But even then, my father kept saying the same thing. Real business is about legacy. Let's see if you're still around in 5 years. And that's when the cracks in Kingswell began to show. Tiny at first, just whispers. A missed contract in Arizona, a leadership shuffle in logistics, outdated equipment, regulatory penalties. The world was changing. Kingswell wasn't. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I watched, waited. And when the right call came, everything I'd built would finally meet everything they refused to fix. The offer came quietly. A whisper, really. From an old Kingswell engineer I'd met at a sustainability conference. "The Texas facility's bleeding cash," he said over coffee. "Old machines, no automation. They built a monument to the past, not a blueprint for the future." That's when it hit me. I didn't have to compete with Kingswell anymore. I could buy it. It sounded insane, emotionally reckless, but financially it made perfect sense. Kingswell still had assets, real estate distribution channels, manufacturing lines. What it lacked was vision, agility, and innovation, all the things Verdant Core had built from the ground up. So I called a meeting, just 4 of us. Tasha looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want to acquire Kingswell?" "No," I said. "I want to save it quietly, cleanly, through a holding company. They can't know it's us." We formed Northlight Capital within a week, hired an M&A firm to front the communication. Verdant's name, buried, hidden, untraceable, until the ink dried. But here's the part no one expected. Decades ago, Kingswell's bylaws were updated to allow any majority stakeholder holding over 51% to assume executive authority without board objection. It was meant to protect the family from hostile outsiders. They never imagined the outsider would be one of their own. Just before we submitted the offer, I got an anonymous package, old memos, audit files, a vulnerability assessment. Inside was a handwritten note. "You'll need this, V." Veronica, my mother, the woman who never spoke up, had quietly handed me the blueprint to break the chain. The offer went in. Silence followed. Then a call from our attorney. They're considering it, quietly, but seriously. The annual Blake family Gala was just a week away, the one night of the year when my father wore his legacy like a crown. I wasn't going to go, but now I wouldn't miss it for the world. The Blake family Gala, held every summer like a coronation, champagne towers, string quartets, and every smug face that had ever called me a side project. I walked in wearing a deep green dress, no power suit, no logo pin, just confidence. My father spotted me from across the room, drink in hand smile already laced with sarcasm. "Didn't think you'd show," he said, handing me a glass. "Still working from home?" I smiled. "Something like that." He laughed. "Well, tonight's not about hobbies. We're celebrating legacy. Big changes ahead." He had no idea. Trevor tapped the mic. Of course he did. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I have the honor of announcing a monumental shift for Kingswell Industries." He beamed. "We've secured a private acquisition, fresh capital, expanded reach, and best of all, the Blake family remains in charge." Applause. My father's eyes glittered. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye. Then Trevor said it. "Our new partners, Northlight Capital, will help lead us into the future." That was my cue. I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, calm and steady, "there's something you should all know about Northlight." The room shifted. Forks paused midair. Heads turned. Trevor blinked. "Madison, this really isn't the time." "No, it is," I said. "Northlight Capital is the holding company that finalized the acquisition this morning. The paperwork was signed at 11:17 a.m. I turned to my father. "And Northlight was created by Verdant Corps, my company. As of this morning, I own Kingswell Industries." The silence slammed harder than any punch. My father's glass slipped, shattered. Trevor's mouth hung open like someone had deleted his script. My mother sat frozen lips, parted eyes wide. "You're lying," Trevor hissed. "I'm not," I said. "You signed the deal. You just didn't know who was behind it." My father stepped forward, voice tight. "This is some kind of stunt." "No," I said. "It's a solution. One you refused to hear over and over. I offered data. I offered help. You mocked it. So I did what was left." "You bought your way in out of spite." Trevor spat. "No, out of necessity. Kingswell was failing. I couldn't let it die. Not when I knew how to save it." My father growled. "You think you can run Kingswell? I already do, and it's more efficient, more sustainable, and more profitable than you ever made it." Then I paused, breathed. "But this isn't revenge. It's an invitation. You can walk away or stay and help rebuild on new terms, true collaboration. No more silencing, no more ego." My father stared through me. Stone. Then he turned and walked out. No words, no fight, just gone. Trevor followed, slamming the French doors behind him. Only my mother remained. Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell us?" I whispered, "Because you never would have listened. You never saw me. Not really, but tonight, you have to." She stood, touched my cheek. "You're your grandfather's fire," she said, eyes soft. "He would have been proud." And that was the first time in my life I heard those words. The headlines hit within hours. Startup CEO quietly acquires industrial giant. Blake daughter reclaims legacy in secret deal. Kingswell new vision. Same name. But I wasn't thinking about the press. I was thinking about the people, the ones who had been told for decades that change wasn't possible. Now we were going to prove it was. Internally, the shift wasn't easy. Some Kingswell veterans called me the kid with the blog. Others whispered activist takeover. I expected resistance. After all, I hadn't just taken over their company, I had challenged their entire world view. Trevor tried to reverse the deal. Hired lawyers. Scoured for loopholes. He found nothing. Because I had done it the right way. Clean. Legal. Bulletproof. Eventually, he went quiet. But what I didn't expect was her. 2 weeks after the party, my mother invited me to lunch. No wine, no small talk, just a pot of tea and silence. Then quietly, "You really did it." I nodded. I had to. She looked down at her cup. "Your grandfather built Kingswell with his hands. Your father built its reputation. But you might be the one who gives it a future." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just breathed. Verdant and Kingswell merged systems. Our team got to work. We started with Kingswell's worst-performing facility, the one in Texas that bled cash. Within 3 months, energy waste down 37%, full compliance restored, employee retention. Up we installed adaptive scheduling, upgraded safety systems, digitized inventory across every plant. Kingswell was no longer a legacy brand. It was a living one. I offered my father a role, chair of legacy relations, symbolic but with real influence, a way to walk beside me, not beneath me. He declined, politely. "I built this company to lead it," he said, "not to answer to my daughter." I replied softly, "I'm not asking you to answer to me. I'm asking you to walk beside me. That's the difference." He didn't say anything, just hung up. But a month later, a package arrived. Inside, a worn hardcover biography of Ray Anderson, the legendary sustainable industrialist, tucked in the front cover, a note. His handwriting unmistakable. "Sustainability isn't the enemy of business. I see that now. You were ahead of us all. Dad." I kept that note in my desk drawer, not because I needed validation, but because sometimes even stone can crack. Today, Kingswell is something new, not a cautionary tale, not a relic, a hybrid, a bridge between the grit of the past and the vision of tomorrow. We've doubled profits, cut emissions by half, created more leadership opportunities for women and marginalized engineers than ever in the company's history. But none of that compares to this. When I walk into the headquarters now, the one that once shut me out, I'm not just tolerated. I'm heard. I'm respected. I belong. Because rewriting a legacy doesn't always mean burning it down. Sometimes it just means daring to imagine it better. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family, only to prove them wrong in the most powerful way possible? Drop your story below. Let's talk about it. Like, subscribe. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is reinvention.